Alpha King Stavor Merrick drove the moon iron seal through the door of Hearthside Moon School, while 37 women stood in the snow and watched their right to read become contraband. The hammer struck once, twice. On the third blow, the silver slates inside the school began to scratch. Stavor lowered the hammer. The sound continued behind the locked door, dozens of chalkless points moving across stone. Evelda Pryn stood at the foot of the steps with a bundle of confiscated lesson books pressed against her ribs. She was 47, broad through the shoulders, with winter gray threaded through her dark hair and the stillness of a woman who had already survived the moment powerful men expected to break her. Royal Censor Althea Gorse unfolded the closure order. Hearthside Moon School is sealed for teaching restricted pack law to persons without standing. Its mistress is forbidden to gather students, reproduce crown statutes, interpret inheritance claims, or instruct unbonded women in legal challenge. The women behind Evelda did not speak. Most wore kitchen wool, laundry aprons, field boots, or the black shoulder cords of widows. 3 had brought daughters. 1 held a ration contract. She had learned to read only 6 nights earlier. Evelda looked at Stavor. "Read the charge yourself." Althea's mouth tightened. "The order has already been proclaimed. I asked the king." Stavor's expression did not change. Snow gathered along the black fur at his collar. He had the height and controlled violence of a ruling alpha, but Evelda remembered the young prince who had once folded himself onto the smallest bench in her first classroom and asked why ration law used 6 words when one would have told the truth. He had been 19 then. He had trusted her finger beneath the line more than the council summaries placed before him. Now he took the closure order from Althea. "You taught women to dispute lawful inheritance transfers. I taught them to find the inheritance clause. You encouraged ration workers to withhold signatures. I taught them where the contract changed winter grain into debt. You distributed royal law without censor approval. I copied the law your court claims to enforce." Althea stepped forward. Her pale robes were edged with gray wolf fur, each clasp stamped with the censor's closed-eye seal. "The common editions exist, so subjects receive law without dangerous ambiguity. Mistress Pryn has taken palace language out of context and turned household grievances into pack unrest." Evelda shifted the lesson books in her arms. One woman kept her winter house because she learned the word irrevocable. Another found that her dead daughter's ration debt had been charged twice. If that is unrest, your peace requires women not to understand what is taken from them. A few students raised their eyes. Stavor saw them and hardened. Enough. The word carried alpha force. Several younger women flinched. Evelda did not. She had heard command in his voice before, years ago, when grief over his mother's death had made his wolf strike at every sound. Back then, he had sat beside the hearth until dawn while Evelda made him copy one sentence again and again. "No pack law is lawful if those bound by it are forbidden to read it." His mother had paid for the first slate. No one at court knew. Perhaps Stavor had decided he no longer did either. He descended one step. "Give me the student register." "No." The royal guards moved. Evelda held the books tighter. "The register contains women who came here because husbands, fathers, stewards, and magistrates punished them for asking what they had signed. You may close the school. You will not receive a list of whom to frighten next." Althea's voice softened. "Refusal confirms sedition." "No. It confirms that trust is not crown property." Stavor stopped close enough for Evelda to see the old scar at the edge of his jaw. He had received it the winter after leaving her classroom, when the northern packs challenged his father. She remembered pressing cloth to that wound while he tried to read a succession oath through blood. "You taught me that law survives scrutiny," he said quietly. "I taught you that law requires it. You are not teaching scrutiny now. You are teaching women to place private interpretation above pack order. Then sit in the class and prove me wrong." Something moved in his eyes. Althea answered for him. "The Alpha King does not sit beneath an unlicensed widow." Evelda looked past her to the sealed door. "He once did." The students heard. So did the guards. Stavor's face became still in the way it did when a wound had been found in public. He turned to the court mason. "Board the side windows. Remove the Moon-Slates for palace examination." Evelda's grip loosened around one book. "You cannot remove them. Because they belong to you? Because they belong to every hand that copied law upon them." Althea gave the mason a thin smile. "They are stones." "No," Evelda said. "They are first witnesses. A first witness did not interpret law. It remembered the first complete version copied onto its surface beneath an authorized royal mark. Scraping away chalk could clear a lesson. It could not remove the original text held within the moonstone. The Moon-Slates did not answer loyalty, pity, or rebellion. They did not defend Evelda. When a moon iron seal closed a school under an order that omitted part of the law, they restored the missing text. The scratching inside stopped. For one breath, the street held only winter wind. Then the moon iron seal across the door began to glow. A line of silver light appeared beneath it. The seal did not break. The door did not open. The school did not resist the king. One moon-slate rose behind the narrow glass panel and turned its face toward the street. Words formed across its surface without chalk. Widow holdings pass by her consent, not by the appetite of her husband's blood. Althea went white. Evelda stopped breathing. That clause had not appeared in any common edition for 22 years. It had been the difference between keeping her home and losing it after her husband died. She had learned of it only too late, inside a palace archive that required a noble sponsor to enter. The slate wiped itself clean. A second clause appeared. No daughter may be denied a ration share for want of mate or male guardian. Then a third. Pack law must be copied whole wherever pack obedience is demanded. The women behind Evelda began to read the words aloud. Not shouting, reading. Althea raised her hand. Break the glass. No, Stavor said. The guards froze. Too late for the door. Too late for Evelda's name, but not too late to prevent the first witnesses from being destroyed. The final slate turned toward him. Its surface filled with the sentence Evelda had watched him copy as a young prince beneath the hearthlight. No pack law is lawful if those bound by it are forbidden to read it. At the bottom appeared the original royal witness mark. Not Stavor's. His mother's. The slates had not cleared Evelda. They had only shown the court which lines it had trained women not to ask for. The moon iron seal still crossed the school door. Snow gathered along the threshold. 37 students remained in the street, their names still hidden inside the register Althea Gorse wanted to seize. The Royal Censor recovered first. Those clauses belonged to an earlier legal order, she said. They were superseded when the common editions were revised. Evelda looked at the silver words behind the glass, then produced the repeal. Althea folded the closure order. Royal reforms do not require every obsolete protection to be copied into public notices. A repeal is not a public notice. It is the act that makes an old law cease. The palace archive holds the authorized sequence. Then open it. Stavor stood beneath the dark wolf banners while the women watched him decide whether law existed beyond the version his censor placed in his hand. He turned to the mason. No one breaks the glass. No moon-slate leaves the school until the archive is compared. Althea's expression sharpened. The slates are unlicensed legal instruments. They are now material evidence. And the student register? Stavor looked toward Evelda's lesson books. It remains where it is. For now? Evelda asked. His eyes met hers. Until legal authority over it is determined. The answer did not protect the women. It merely delayed the hand reaching for their names. The slates had shown the law. They had not protected the women whose names still waited inside the register. Althea stepped toward the guards. The register records coordinated instruction in inheritance challenge, ration refusal, and household claims. It may establish organized sedition. It records who learned to read, Evelda said. It records women taught to dispute lawful guardians. One is 12. Her uncle signed away her winter ration because she could not read the number beside her thumbprint. That is a household grievance. It became crown business when a crown contract enforced it. Althea's voice remained calm. Pack order depends upon common language. Palace law contains exceptions, ancestral clauses, and conflicting precedents. The common editions protect subjects from dangerous ambiguity. A common edition was not common mercy, Evelda said. It was a small law made for people the court preferred small. One student lowered her head over the ration contract in her hands. Stavor saw it. Years earlier, he had sat in Evelda's first classroom with the same concentration, tracing each line until meaning stopped belonging to whoever read it aloud for him. Now his own seal held the door shut. Bring the full archive edition, he ordered, and every repeal entered against the clauses shown. Althea faced him. The Royal Archive cannot be carried into a public street. Then bring certified copies under guard. Certification belongs to the censor's office. Not for this comparison. The words cost her authority in front of witnesses. They did not return Evelda's school. 2 archive keepers arrived before dusk carrying a locked silverwood chest. A magistrate, a pack clerk, and 3 Moon Court witnesses followed. The chest contained the whole law volumes copied for royal use, and the smaller common editions distributed to villages, guild halls, ration offices, and widow tribunals. Althea placed the latest common volume on a standing desk. The widow holdings clause was removed during household consolidation reform. "Show the repeal page," Evelda said. A clerk searched the repeal index. No entry appeared. Althea opened another register. "Certain clauses lapse when later law governs the same subject. Then show the later law." The inheritance reform contained rules for bloodline transfer, debt collection, and male guardianship. It did not repeal widow consent. It simply omitted it. Evelda turned toward the witnesses. "An omitted protection is not a dead law." Althea answered without hesitation. "It is a protection no longer suitable for common administration." Suitable for whom? For magistrates required to govern households without endless private dispute. For men who inherit faster when widows cannot read. A low sound moved through the students. Stavor silenced it with one look, but he did not silence Evelda. The archive keeper opened Queen Mother Stavor Merrick's witness edition. Her silver mark appeared beside the widow clause, the daughter ration clause, and the requirement that pack law be copied whole wherever obedience was demanded. No repeal marks followed. No supersession seal crossed the margin. Only a gap in the common edition where the protection should have been. Behind the school glass, one Moon-Slate turned. It did not produce another law. A single number appeared in its upper corner. Clause 47, line 3. The archive keeper found the same margin number in Sabath's volume. The common edition jumped from line 2 to line 5. 2 lines had been removed without renumbering the page. A first witness did not interpret law. It remembered the first whole version a crowned hand had allowed common people to copy. Althea studied the missing line. "Clerical compression. Across every common edition?" Evelda asked. "Repetition does not prove intent." "No. The order authorizing repetition will." Stavor looked toward the distribution register. "Who approved the shortened copies?" Althea closed one hand over the ledger. The first-year council reviewed hundreds of emergency reforms after Queen Mother Sabath's death. Grain riots, border challenges, and inheritance disputes threatened the pack. "That was not my question." Her eyes lifted to him. "You approved the council program. Show me the order." For the first time, the winter air seemed to reach beneath Althea's composure. She broke the censor seal on a narrow folio. Inside lay the directive that established common editions for all law distributed beyond the palace. Its language permitted the censor to remove confusing ancestral provisions, where household stability required a simplified text. The listed removals included widow consent, daughter ration standing, independent inheritance claims, and access to uncensored pack law. Evelda read every line. Then she looked at Stavor. The closure seal still held. His doubt had not reopened anything. The paper he had used against her school came from the same machinery that had once taken her home. At the bottom of the directive stood the mark authorizing the removals. Not Althea's censor seal alone. The Black Wolf King Seal of Stavor Merrick, dated in the first year of his reign. The seal did not prove Stavor had written the theft. It proved the theft had worn his authority. The Black Wolf mark remained at the bottom of the directive while snow gathered against Hearthside Moon School, and the moon iron closure held the door shut. Althea Gorse placed one hand beside the folio. The first year of his reign was not governed from a quiet room. Grain stores were attacked. Border packs withheld winter tribute. Household claims flooded local courts after Queen Mother Sabath's death. The common editions prevented every village magistrate from becoming a rival lawgiver. Evelda looked at the removed clauses. They prevented widows from knowing when magistrates stole their houses. They simplified conflicting inheritance customs. They removed consent. They removed ambiguity. The common edition did not simplify law. It simplified theft. Stavor lifted the directive. "I remember the reform package." "Then you remember why it was necessary," Althea said. "I remember a summary on household stability, ration continuity, and emergency court consolidation. I do not remember these removals." The annex was attached. "Bring me the summary I was given." A clerk produced a thinner document bound in black thread. Stavor opened it with hands that had once turned pages beneath Evelda's instruction. The summary named disorder. Widow claims delaying bloodline transfer, daughters challenging ration guardians, and unmated women filing inheritance petitions without male sponsors. It recommended a simplified public edition. It did not name the clauses that would disappear. Where is the annex? The clerk pointed to a small mark in the lower margin. Annex 12. Administrative removals. The letters were narrow, pressed close to the binding, where a reader's thumb might cover them. The annex was legally incorporated, Althea said. The king's seal applied to the whole directive. Evelda looked at Stavor. You signed the way they made us sign, with the dangerous line hidden where trust was supposed to be. He knew her history. After her husband died, a steward had placed an inheritance transfer beneath a winter fuel petition. Evelda had pressed her thumb to both. By spring, the house belonged to her husband's brother. She had been told she had consented. I should have read the annex, Stavor said. It was not an apology. It was an admission too small for the years beneath his seal. Yes, Evelda said, and every woman punished for failing to read what men concealed was told the same. A king cannot examine every administrative line, Althea replied. No, but he can decide whether hidden consent binds only the powerless. Stavor faced the court clerk. Open the first-year council minutes. Every discussion of Annex 12. Council deliberations are sealed, Althea said. By whose order? Your father's standing rule, renewed under your reign. Then I revoke the seal for this inquiry. You cannot expose emergency council speech before unlicensed students. The students remain outside, and their register remains inside. The archive had found the missing law. It had not hidden the women whose names Althea still wanted. The register must be secured, Althea said. No one removes it, Stavor ordered. Suspending seizure does not protect evidence from alteration. Place 2 court witnesses at the door. Evelda's expression hardened. And when the seal is opened, the register remains under witnessed custody. Whose custody? The court's. Then you still intend to own the names? Before he answered, shouting rose at the end of the street. A heavy man in a steward's coat forced through the women with 2 household guards and a girl of 16. The girl's cheek was red. Evelda recognized Mara L. She had learned to read ration fractions at Hearthside and discovered that her uncle claimed 3 shares under her dead mother's name. The steward pointed at Evelda. She has corrupted my ward. Mara held her coat closed. I asked him to show me the ledger. You accused your lawful guardian of theft. The numbers accused him. He turned to Althea. I demand the register. If her name appears, she returns to my house under discipline. Althea looked at Evelda. This is the unrest I warned of. Evelda stepped between Mara and the steward. This is why you want the names. She is a minor under blood guardianship. She is entitled to her mother's ration share. Under which edition? Althea asked. The question was a blade. The common law denied Mara independent standing. The whole law did not. Behind the glass, the Moon-Slate showed no new clause, accusation, or rescue. Only the margin number already written. Clause 47, line 3. Evidence waited. People remained vulnerable. Until the full law is determined, Stavor said, no Hearthside student may be punished, removed from current lodging, denied ration, or subjected to household discipline for attendance. The steward's face darkened. You suspend guardian rights on the word of a widow? On my authority. Evelda looked at Stavor. Temporary protection. Yes. Dependent on your command. Yes. Then it ends when fear changes your mind. His jaw tightened. I am stopping harm. You are delaying it until law catches up. He did not deny that. The clerk brought the first-year council minutes. 12 pages recorded grain violence, border tribute, and demands that household disputes be contained. Annex 12 appeared only once. Recommended by the Royal Censor's office. Approved without individual reading. No debate on widow consent. No vote on daughter ration standing. No mention that whole law required public access wherever obedience was demanded. Althea pointed to the final line. Unanimous emergency adoption. Of the package, Evelda said. Not informed adoption of what you buried inside it. The archive keeper turned the page. A folded strip of white vellum had been sewn into the binding and sealed with old silver wax. Queen Mother Sabeth Merrick's wolf and crescent mark remained unbroken. Stavor went still. My mother died before the reforms. 3 days before the council vote, the keeper said. The filing date was entered after her death. Althea's face did not change. A deceased queen's private objection holds no force against a reigning king's seal. Objection to what? Stavor asked. The keeper read the notation. Common law compression. Annex 12. Warning against removal of women's standing clauses. Evelda looked from Sabeth's sealed dissent to Stavor's mark on the directive. His mother had witnessed the whole law. His first-year seal had helped bury it, and someone had sewn her warning into a closed council book where no common reader could find it. Sabeth's warning had weight. Althea would make sure it did not yet have law. The archive keeper held the sealed vellum above the standing desk, while snow thickened around Hearthside Moon School. A private dissent filed after death cannot overturn a reigning king's emergency directive, Althea said. Queen, Mother Sabeth's witness mark proves authorship. It does not grant force. Stavor looked at the silver wax. Read it into the inquiry. The document was never entered into public law. It will be entered into the record now. Althea's eyes narrowed. You may record grief. You may not treat grief as repeal. The keeper broke the seal. Sabeth warned that removing widow consent, daughter ration standing, and access to whole law would not create order. It would create obedience obtained through ignorance. Her final paragraph carried a sharper claim. Any ruler who demands obedience while suppressing the whole law breaks the pact compact before those he governs do. The students listened from the snow. No Moon-Slate moved. No door opened. A sealed school could not teach. A warning inside an archive could not yet protect anyone outside it. Althea folded her hands. Advisory language, no council vote, no living sovereign's seal. Her witness edition remained lawful, Evelda said, until the first-year emergency reforms, which never repealed the clauses. They replaced their public use. That is not the same thing. It is under administrative law. Evelda looked toward the women behind her. Then administrative law has made theft easier to perform and harder to name. More household men had arrived while the dissent was read. Magistrates, guardians, a grain overseer, and a widow's brother-in-law carrying a property chain. They had not come to hear Sabeth. They had come for the register. Althea turned to Stavor. The school's records must be preserved as evidence of coordinated legal challenge. Every name, lesson, and disputed household should be secured under censor authority. The register was not paper. It was 37 doors. Powerful households wanted. Opened. One magistrate pointed toward a laundress. That woman withheld a ration signature after attending here. I asked why the amount changed, the laundress said. You delayed winter distribution. I delayed my own debt. A guardian seized his niece by the sleeve. If her name is in that book, she returns under household discipline. Release her, Stavor ordered. The man obeyed because alpha force reached him faster than law. Evelda saw the girl's fear remain. You cannot protect Mara by command and leave the law that endangered her untouched. I have not finished. The women have heard that before. Stavor faced the officials. Enforcement of Annex 12 is suspended until the whole. Law inquiry concludes. No student of Hearthside may be removed, denied ration, dispossessed, or punished for attending. Althea stepped forward. You suspend an active royal reform in a public street. I suspend enforcement of clauses whose lawful removal has not been shown. The common additions remain valid until formally struck. Then no penalty may rely upon the disputed omissions. And the register? Althea asked. It remains sealed inside. 2 Moon Court witnesses guard the door. No crown officer, guardian, magistrate, or household representative enters without open order. Evelda held his chaza. Suspending seizure is not protection, it is delay. It prevents those men from taking the names tonight. And tomorrow? The inquiry continues. Private protection would leave every other village reading the same small law. What do you require? Stavor asked. The removed clauses restored to every common edition. The closure accusation withdrawn. The censor's office required to name each omitted line. Attendance declared lawful. The register protected as a learning record, not sedition evidence. You ask for final judgment before the inquiry ends. I ask that the harm stop before the court finishes deciding whether it was permitted. Althea addressed the witnesses. This is why archive law cannot be handed to untrained readers. If every widow invokes an ancestral clause, inheritance freezes. If every daughter disputes ration guardianship, grain courts collapse. If every school copies palace law without supervision, no magistrate governs consistently. Consistency is not justice when the same missing line harms the same people everywhere, Evelda said. Stavor looked toward Sabeth's descent. His mother had warned him from the binding. Evelda had warned him from the snow. Still, the moon iron seal remained. The school stays closed pending determination of whether its copies were lawful, he said. Several students lowered their eyes. Evelda did not. A frozen law can still frighten. A sealed school can still starve the women who depended on it. No one will be punished, because you ordered it today. Yes, and if the council convinces you tomorrow? He did not answer quickly enough. Althea took the silence. The Alpha King preserves order while evidence is examined. Mistress Pryn demands that her school become a court above the court. No, Evelda said. I demand that women be allowed to read the court before it enters their homes. The archive keeper turned Sabeth's descent over. A second notation appeared beneath the filing date, sealed under Royal Grief Protection, authorized by the First-Year Continuity Council. Stavor frowned. What is grief protection? A provision preventing private writings made during royal mourning from destabilizing succession, Althea said. My mother wrote this before she died. It was received after. Who classified it? The Continuity Council. Names. The clerk opened the roster. Althea Gorse appeared first as legal secretary. 6 senior counselors followed. Open every grief protection filing from that year, Stavor ordered. You will expose a dead queen's private fears to public appetite, Althea said. I will expose whatever kept lawful warning out of the record. A court clerk arrived carrying Hearthside's original closure file and placed it beside Sabeth's descent. Evelda recognized the accusation read that morning. Restricted pack law, inheritance agitation, ration refusal, unlicensed instruction. The clerk opened the drafting folio. The closure order had been written 12 days earlier. Evelda counted backward. 12 days ago, her students had still been practicing contract numbers. She had not yet copied the widow clause, daughter ration clause, or whole law requirement onto any lesson page. Stavor read the lesson dates. Then the drafting date. Althea looked at the file without surprise. Preventive review is lawful when unrest is foreseeable. Evelda touched the closure order. The school had not been closed because the women copied the disputed laws. The disputed laws had been chosen because the closure was already waiting. The closure order had not answered what Evelda taught. It had been waiting for her to teach anything the council could call dangerous. Althea Gorse rested one hand on the drafting folio. Preventive review is lawful when a pattern of unrest is established. What pattern? Evelda asked. Widows challenging property transfer. Daughters disputing ration guardianship. Unmated women demanding archive access without standing. Those are petitions. When coordinated through one school, they become organized pressure. They become women discovering the same theft was used against all of them. Althea turned toward Stavor. Hearthside did not merely teach letters. It connected grievances across households. The Crown was required to act before local disputes became pack-wide defiance. Stavor looked at the date again. What evidence supported preventive closure? The censor's intelligence file. Open it. Althea's expression remained composed. Informant reports are protected, not when they produced a royal order before the alleged offense occurred. Revealing sources will expose loyal households to retaliation. Evelda looked toward the men waiting beyond the students. The households are already standing in the street. Stavor faced the court clerk. Bring the file. The clerk hesitated until Stavor's wolf showed briefly in his eyes. Then he obeyed. A narrow black case arrived beneath 2 guard seals. Inside were reports from ration offices, widow tribunals, inheritance magistrates, grain stewards, and household guardians. Evelda read the first page. Mara L. had requested her dead mother's ration account. The laundress had refused to sign a debt adjustment without seeing the original sum. A widow from South Hearth had asked whether her brother-in-law possessed written consent to sell her winter house. None of the reports mentioned rebellion. Each mentioned Hearthside. They were watched for asking questions, Evelda said. They were reported because the same language appeared across separate disputes. Althea replied. What language? The clerk read from one complaint. Show me the line that gives you the right. Another report contained the same request. A third used different words. I will not sign until I read what binds me. Althea looked toward the Moon Court witnesses. Coordinated phrasing demonstrates instruction intended to obstruct lawful administration. It demonstrates literacy, Evelda said. The distinction is not yours to decide. It became mine when officials treated a question as evidence of sedition. Stavor turned another page. 37 names appeared in a column beneath the heading Suspected Hearthside Attendees. Evelda went still. The student register remained locked inside the school. Althea already possessed most of it. The archive found the missing law, Evelda said. It did not hide the women whose names you had already gathered elsewhere. These names came from lawful household reports. They came from every office that punished women for asking to read. The register was not the first list. It was the only list Evelda had kept from them. Mara's uncle stepped forward. If her name appears in royal intelligence, I demand immediate restoration of guardian discipline. Stavor faced him. You were ordered not to touch her, under temporary suspension, which remains. The man bowed, but his resentment stayed fixed on Mara. Another official raised a property chain. The widow in my district has delayed transfer for 9 days. If disputed clauses freeze inheritance, creditors will seize the grain store. You sold her house before confirming whether she consented, Evelda said. She cannot prove refusal. She was never shown the transfer. Althea addressed the witnesses. This is precisely the administrative collapse the common editions prevented. Full law disputes multiply faster than local courts can hear them. Then train the courts, Evelda said. At whose cost? The women have already paid. Stavor closed the intelligence file. No official may act against a named student while the inquiry continues. Althea's voice sharpened. You cannot suspend every household order connected to this school. I can suspend penalties based on attendance, and if attendance concealed coordinated fraud, then prove fraud without using the act of learning as guilt. Evelda heard the echo of the prince he had been. It did not erase the king who had sealed her door. A sealed school cannot teach the women whose contracts arrive tomorrow, she said. The closure remains until its legal basis is reviewed. You found that the order was drafted before the lessons named in the charge. I found reason to question the basis. You found the charge was waiting for an excuse. Althea stepped between them. Preventive law does not require the final act to occur. It requires credible risk. Then name the risk plainly, Evelda said. That women without standing would use archive law to destabilize household authority. The answer was not a confession. It was doctrine. Stavor looked toward the black case. Who ordered Hearthside placed under preventive observation? Althea opened the final page. The monitoring authority bore the censor's closed-eye seal and the mark of the first-year continuity council, dated 1 month after Sabeth's death. Evelda looked at the date. Hearthside did not exist then. No, Althea said. But your teaching did. The cold reached deeper than the snow. Before the school had a door, before the Moon-Slates had been fitted into its walls, before Evelda had trained her first widow to read a ration line, the council had already named her instruction a future threat. Why? Stavor asked. Althea turned to a separate registry. Because Queen, Mother Sabeth proposed a public law house beyond palace control. The archive keeper opened another sealed folder. Inside lay the founding grant for Hearthside Moon School. Not a private deed, a royal educational trust. Sabeth's signature appeared beneath a provision requiring that any subject bound by pack law be permitted to learn the text in full, regardless of rank, sex, mating status, or household sponsorship. Evelda had never seen the complete document. Sabeth had sent money through a widow's grain charity and told Evelda only that an old ally believed the school should survive. Althea touched the final page. The trust required annual royal renewal. Queen Mother Sabeth died before the 2nd year. So the school lost protection, Stavor said. It continued by private tolerance. Evelda studied the seal line. No. A narrow notation ran beneath the renewal clause. If the royal patron died before review, the trust became perpetual upon confirmation by its first crowned pupil. The archive keeper unfolded the witness page. A young prince had signed beneath the clause in uneven black ink. Stavor Merrick, age 19. First pupil of Hearthside instruction. The school had not survived by tolerance. It had survived under a perpetual royal trust Stavor himself had once witnessed. And the king who sealed its door had never asked whether his own name already stood beneath the right to keep it open. Stavor's 19-year-old signature changed the question before the school. It did not remove the moon iron seal. The archive keeper laid Sabeth's trust beside the closure order while witnesses pressed closer through the snow. Althea Gorse examined the renewal clause. A prince may witness a grant. He cannot bind a future crown before accession. The clause did not ask him to bind the crown, Evelda said. It asked the first crown pupil to confirm that the school had begun its work. He signed as a student, not a sovereign. He signed with his name. The women you govern are told a mark binds them whether they understood the page or not. Althea looked toward Stavor. Will you claim a boy's classroom signature outweighs the king seal you placed on Annex 12? One mark had helped keep Hearthside alive. Another had helped bury the law it taught. Stavor turned to the archive keeper. Was the trust entered into the Royal Property Register? Yes. Perpetual educational holding. Exempt from household seizure. Was it repealed? No repeal appears. Althea closed the trust. Then it survived as property, not as unlimited authority to teach palace law. Sabeth funded letters, sums, and household records. Evelda expanded the school into legal challenge. Evelda pointed to the founding purpose. Read the final line. The keeper did. To provide any subject bound by pack law the means to read that law whole. Althea answered without pause. Means to read. Not authority to organize claims, obstruct magistrates, or teach women to resist guardians. I taught them where the words ended. You taught them their reading outranked administration. No. I taught them administration does not become lawful because the reader wears a seal. Stavor looked toward the closed door. Inside, the student register remained beyond Althea's hands. Outside, the intelligence file already exposed 37 women to retaliation. Remove every Hearthside name from active monitoring, he ordered. Althea's composure tightened. You cannot destroy intelligence evidence. Seal it from household, magistrate, and ration use. Attendance alone cannot support penalty. The censor's office determines relevance, not in this inquiry. The clerk took the black case. Evelda watched it pass from Althea to royal custody. A different lock, she said. Stavor met her eyes. Yes. Then do not call it safety. He did not. Mara L. stood behind Evelda, one hand wrapped around her bruised wrist. Her uncle remained among the household men, waiting for Stavor's temporary order to weaken. The girls need written protection, Evelda said, not a command remembered only while you stand here. Stavor faced the recorder. Enter that no Hearthside student may be punished, removed, dispossessed, denied ration, or subjected to guardianship discipline for attendance, or legal questions raised from whole law text while the inquiry remains open. Althea stepped forward. That suspends household authority across the capital. It suspends retaliation. It invites every dependent to call discipline retaliation. Then officials will state their reasons in writing. The students heard that. So did the guardians. Power disliked written reasons because written reasons could be compared. The recorder entered the order. Evelda did not thank Stavor. The women were safer than an hour earlier. They were still standing before a sealed school under an accusation drafted before the lessons named in it. Althea lifted Sabeth's trust again. If Hearthside claims royal protection, it submits to royal review. The court must inspect its curriculum and student records. The curriculum, yes, Evelda said. The names, no. A school cannot claim lawful purpose while concealing enrollment. A learning record is not a criminal role. Then let the Moon Court decide. Stavor looked toward the school windows. What review did Sabeth's grant require? The archive keeper turned to the final provisions. Any dispute over instructional scope must be heard through a public reading challenge. Althea's gaze shifted. The challenger identifies the teaching alleged unlawful. The school mistress reads the whole law source. The Crown representative reads the common edition. Witnesses determine whether the lesson exceeded the law or the distributed law omitted material text. Who serves as Crown representative? Stavor asked. The first Crown pupil, if living. Snow moved through the silence. Althea recovered first. The king cannot sit in a school under sedition review. The trust says otherwise, Evelda replied. It was written before he inherited the pack. So was the law you call obsolete? Stavor looked at Evelda. Years ago he had sat beside the hearth while she corrected his letters without lowering her eyes when his wolf growled at failure. Now 37 women watched whether he would submit to the instruction he had denied them. The reading challenge will be held at Moon Court, he said. No, Evelda answered. Stavor's face hardened. You refuse lawful review? I refuse a palace room where every woman entering can be counted by the offices already watching them. The Moon Court is the lawful venue. The trust names public reading. It does not name palace walls. The archive keeper checked. She is correct. Evelda pointed to the sealed school. The challenge happens here. Before the women named dangerous for learning. Before the magistrates using common editions. Before the households that wanted the register. The building remains closed, Althea said. Then hold the reading in the street. A king does not sit in snow to answer a widow's lesson. Stavor looked at the students whose boots had gone white with cold. They have. The words did not reopen the school or remove his seal. But he ordered benches brought from Moon Court and placed before Hearthside's locked door. The public reading would begin at moonrise. Althea selected the lesson she believed would destroy Evelda's claim. Widow inheritance and household transfer. The law that had taken Evelda's home. The law Stavor's first-year seal had helped make smaller. As the clerk prepared the folios, the archive keeper found one final condition beneath Sabeth's trust. If the first crown pupil failed the whole law reading, the closure remained valid. If the common edition failed, every copy distributed under the king seal would be recalled before the next moon. Althea looked at Stavor. You have not studied whole law in 28 years. Evelda gathered the lesson books against her chest. At moonrise, the Alpha King would sit before the widow whose school he had sealed, and she would not be permitted to help him read. At moonrise, Alpha King Stavor Merrick took the lowest bench before the sealed school. The throne dais brought from Moon Court stood empty behind him. Evelda had refused it. 37 women sat in 2 rows beneath wool cloaks, with magistrates, guardians, ration officers, and pack clerks gathered beyond them. Althea Gorse stood beside the reading table, where the whole law archive and common edition rested under separate witness seals. The moon iron closure still crossed the school door. No slate rose. No hidden clause appeared to spare anyone the work of reading. The challenge belonged to human eyes now. The Moon Court recorder announced the terms. Widow inheritance and household transfer. The school mistress will identify the lesson accused of exceeding lawful instruction. The first crown pupil will read the corresponding common law. The whole law text will then be compared before witnesses. Althea placed Evelda's lesson page on the table. It contained one sentence. A widow may not lose dwelling, tools, winter grain, or hereditary holding without informed consent entered apart from debt, ration, or burial documents. This, Althea said, is the language Hearthside taught as binding law. It is the language Sabeth's witness edition preserved, Evelda replied. It combines several provisions and presents them as one rule. So, the students could recognize the rule when officials divided it across documents. You condensed law. I taught meaning. You interpreted. I made theft harder to hide behind arrangement. Althea turned towards Stavor. Read the common inheritance provision. He opened the smaller volume. The page smelled of old leather and court dust. Evelda saw his hand pause above the first line, not from fear of letters, but from recognition. He had read beside her before. Never like this. Upon a husband's death, Stavor began. Household holdings pass according to blood priority, registered debt, and lawful guardianship. A widow retains winter residence at the discretion of the inheriting bloodline until transfer is completed. Mara L's uncle smiled. Evelda did not look at him. Continue, she said. Stavor reached the bottom of the page. There is no more. Check the margin. A tiny mark directed the reader to Supplement 4. Althea presented the supplement. Stavor read rules governing creditor claims and burial expenses. No widow consent appeared. Now the whole law, the recorder said. Evelda opened Sabeth's witness edition. She did not read for Stavor. She placed her finger beneath the first line and addressed the women. Read with me. Their voices began unevenly. A widow retains independent standing after her husband's death. They continued. No inheritance transfer shall include her dwelling, tools, winter provision, or hereditary holding without consent, recorded in a separate instrument, and witnessed beyond the inheriting household. The words moved through the street. Some women read slowly. Some knew the sentence by memory. One mouthed each syllable while her daughter whispered the difficult words beside her. Stavor listened from the lowest bench. Althea waited until the final line. The common edition does not contradict that passage, she said. It prioritizes administration and leaves exceptional standing to palace review. Evelda looked at her. How does a widow request palace review if her common edition never tells her the right exists? Through a magistrate. The magistrate reads the same omission. Through a recognized advocate. Paid from the property already transferred? A few clerks looked away. Althea addressed the recorder. The challenge asks whether Hearthside exceeded lawful instruction, not whether access procedures are generous. It taught a clause absent from the authorized public volume, one magistrate said. A lawful clause, Evelda answered, unavailable to common standing. Then the crime is availability. Stavor closed the common edition. The distributed text instructs widows to accept transfer while withholding the condition that makes transfer lawful. Althea faced him. It instructs magistrates to preserve household continuity until questions reach proper review. You called the omission simplification. It is. It changes what the reader believes she may refuse. That is interpretation. No, Evelda said. That is the page doing what it was designed to do. The recorder requested the next disputed lesson. Althea produced a transfer form taken from Hearthside. Evelda recognized it. A widow named Lessa Varn had brought the document after a steward placed her housing surrender beneath an application for burial grain. You instructed her not to sign, Althea said. I instructed her to separate the pages. Her refusal delayed burial payment. The steward could have issued the grain without taking her house. The forms were administratively joined. So were mine. Silence followed. Stavor knew what she meant. Years earlier, after Evelda's husband died, her inheritance transfer had been hidden beneath winter fuel relief. She had marked both pages because the official told her refusal would leave her without heat. Althea's gaze remained steady. Private injury does not establish universal law. No, Evelda said. The whole law does. Stavor examined Lessa's form. At the bottom, beneath the burial grain request, a narrow clause transferred dwelling rights to the husband's eldest brother. The lettering was smaller. The witness space was shared. You signed the way they made us sign, Evelda had told him. Now the same method lay beneath his hand. Was this form approved under Annex 12? He asked. Yes, Althea said. Did the approval disclose that separate consent remained required under whole law? The common process superseded unnecessary duplication. You merged assistance with surrender. We reduced administrative delay. You made hunger carry the pen. The words came from Stavor, but Evelda did not soften. He had signed the package that made the form possible. Recognition was not repair. The Moon Court witnesses compared the lesson, common edition, whole law, and transfer form. One by one, they entered their findings. Hearthside had taught an active clause. The common edition omitted that clause. The transfer form relied upon the omission. The first reading belonged to Evelda. Althea lifted a second folio. One successful comparison does not resolve the school's scope. The trust requires the first crown pupil to complete the whole challenge. 3 lessons remain. Stavor looked at the pages. Daughter ration. Standing. Independent petition rights. Access to whole law. He had not studied any of them since boyhood. Evelda returned to her place among the women. He spoke quietly. You know where the common edition bends. Yes, you could tell me. I could. She did not move. Will you? No. And the refusal struck more cleanly than accusation. You closed the room where I taught, she said. You will read under the same conditions you left them. Stavor looked toward the women beside him. Not subjects arranged beneath a throne, readers waiting to see whether the king could bear the ignorance his law had assigned them. He opened the ration volume. Before he could begin, the archive keeper broke the seal on the next whole law folio and stopped. A strip had been cut from the binding, not an erased clause. An entire witness page was missing. The recorder examined the exposed thread. Recent removal. Althea's eyes went to the archive guards. Evelda looked at the empty place where Sabbath's mark should have been. Someone had allowed the first lesson to proceed, then removed the evidence needed for the second. The missing page changed the reading challenge from a lesson into an inquiry over who had touched the law before the women were allowed to see it. Stavor remained on the low bench. Closed the street. Royal guards moved to both ends of Hearthside Lane. No archive case returned to the palace. Althea Gorse placed 2 fingers beside the cut binding. This folio is compromised. The challenge must be suspended until the archive certifies a replacement. And returned to whose custody? Evelda asked. The Royal Censors. The office that brought it here incomplete? The censor's office preserves admissible law. A page may be removed when its witness mark fails review. Then produce the removal order. Stavor looked toward the archive guards. Who prepared the folios? The censor's clerks, the older guard said. Althea intervened. Clerks cannot be dragged before a hostile crowd every time a binding tears. The thread did not tear, Evelda said. She studied the clean cut beneath the witness fold. Silver sizing remained where the page had been lifted, without harming the neighboring text. This was removed by someone trained in royal binding. An opinion from an unlicensed schoolmistress, Althea said. I repaired law books before I taught from them. You repaired village copies. I repaired Stavor's first succession reader after he dropped it in hearthwater. Several faces turned toward the king. She knows binding work, he said. Not affection. Evidence. The archive keeper examined the cut through a horn lens. Recent removal, within 3 days. The challenge had been announced only hours earlier. Who knew which folio would be selected? Evelda asked. The censor's office identified the disputed lessons this afternoon, Althea replied. After you knew the first crown pupil had to read them. Timing is not proof. No, the ledger is. Stavor held out his hand. The preparation register showed that witness page R7 had been transferred that afternoon for authenticity review. Transferred where? He asked. To the Grief Protection Office, Althea said. The same office that had sealed Sabeth's descent. On whose request? Evelda asked. Mine. Not confession. Procedure. The page bore a posthumous witness notation. Any document tied to a dead sovereign and disputed reform requires review for succession interference. You selected the lesson, then removed the page needed to test it. I withheld an uncertified mark. The ration law remains. Without the authorization your office says common readers must trust. A murmur moved through the magistrates. Stavor looked at Althea. Was the review completed? No. Yet you began the challenge. The trust required timely hearing. With evidence you made incomplete. With contested evidence withheld understanding procedure. Evelda faced the students. This is how the small law survives. Sometimes no sentence is burned. The page is simply moved into a room the reader has no standing to enter. Mara L. stood. Then bring the room here. The students repeated it. Bring the room here. Not chanting. Reading had taught them to make a demand without begging. Stavor Rose. Retrieve page R7 under witness. The Grief Protection Office answers to the Royal Censor, Althea said. Not tonight. The words stripped authority from her publicly. They did not reopen Evelda's school. Stavor appointed 2 Moon Court witnesses, the archive keeper, and 1 student chosen by Evelda. She chose Mara, Althea objected. She is implicated in the school's unrest. She is the person whose rations standing the page concerns, Evelda said, which destroys neutrality. Those harmed by missing law are always called biased when they ask to see it. The retrieval party left beneath guard. The closure seal stayed fixed across the school. Household men remained in the cold, calculating how long Stavor's temporary protection might last. You could have gone, he told Evelda. If I leave, Althea asks for the register. Althea did not deny it. The records require preservation. The names remain protected. By what law? The whole law right to petition without retaliation. A clause not yet established. Then by my body until it is. Stavor's wolf stirred behind his eyes. You should not have to stand there alone. I am not alone. 37 women rose behind her. His concern did not erase his seal. It only showed he finally understood what stood on the other side of it. The retrieval party returned before midnight carrying a flat silver case. The page was there, Mara said, filed under royal grief contamination. The archive keeper opened the case. Witness page R7 lay intact. Sabeth's mark glowed faintly beside the daughter ration clause. Her handwritten instruction remained clear. No guardian may speak over a daughter whose ration, labor, or inheritance is being taken. Advisory annotation, Althea said. The keeper turned the page over. A second seal appeared on the back. Stavor's accession confirmation, dated 6 months after his coronation. He stared at it. I never saw this page. Your accession office confirms surviving witness folios in bulk, Althea said. Another package. Another seal. Another law wearing his authority without entering his eyes. Evelda met his chase. Then read it now. Stavor placed the page beside the common edition. The common text gave guardians control of a daughter's ration until mating or majority. The whole law granted the daughter independent standing whenever the guardian profited from the account. Mara's uncle began moving backward through the crowd. The recorder ordered him to remain. Mara unfolded the inventory copy she had carried from the Grief Protection Office. There was another entry beside page R7. The recorder took it. A sealed packet had been deposited under the same classification 2 years earlier. Hearthside Student Identities. Prepared for household notification upon final closure. The packet had been prepared 2 years before the school was closed. Not after unrest. Not after disputed lessons. Before Althea possessed the accusation she read that morning, her office had already decided which households would be told that 37 women had learned too much. The Moon Court recorder held the inventory slip beneath the lantern. Household notification upon final closure, he read. Guardian, steward, ration office, and inheritance magistrate. Evelda looked at the students behind her. The register inside Hearthside had never been Althea's only path to their names. It had been the one record Evelda could still refuse to surrender. Open the packet, Stavor said. Althea Gorse raised one hand. Not in public. It contains protected household intelligence. It contains the names of women your office intended to expose. It contains lawful contacts responsible for dependents, property, and ration administration. Open it without reading the student names aloud, Evelda said. Read who prepared it, what triggered release, and which punishments were recommended. Althea turned toward the witnesses. She is directing a royal inquiry as though her school were the court. No, I am preventing your procedure from harming the women while you explain why harming them was procedure. Stavor looked to the recorder. Do as she said. Each student had a folded notice ready for delivery. The recorder read only the headings. Review of widow residence. Suspension of disputed ration share. Restoration of guardian custody. Investigation of unauthorized petition. Withdrawal of guild recommendation. None was called punishment. Each removed something a woman needed to survive. Mara's uncle stepped forward. These are ordinary household corrections. Mara looked at him. You took my mother's grain. I administered a dependent account. You ate from it. Althea's voice cut across them. The notices preserve order while legal standing is examined. No person is condemned merely for attending the school. She is only made homeless, hungry, voiceless, or dependent until examination ends, Evelda said. The Crown cannot allow coordinated claims to outrun the courts. The courts were given books that removed the claims. Stavor took one folded notice. The student name remained covered, but the release condition was visible. Upon confirmation of Hearthside closure, under Moon-Iron's seal, his seal on the door would have opened 37 other doors to punishment. Who authorized this system? He asked. The Continuity Council, under Annex 12, Althea said. Did I approve individual notices? You approved the administrative power. Again, authority without reading. He had not needed to hate the women whose clauses vanished. He had only needed to trust the people who told him the clauses were too difficult for them. No notice leaves this packet, Stavor said. No office acts on attendance. Any official who has opened a Hearthside review will report it before dawn. You are dismantling lawful administration in response to a public spectacle, Althea said. I am preventing a closure order from becoming a punishment list. You cannot protect the pack by distrusting every office beneath you. No, Evelda said. He protected your system by trusting it without reading. Stavor took the blow without command. Continue the challenge. Althea's gaze hardened. The crowd is hostile. The women are reading. That is not neutrality. It is the condition your office treated as danger. He returned to the lowest bench. Evelda sat beside Mara, not beside him. Stavor read the common ration law first. It granted guardians control until mating or majority. Then he read Sabbath's whole law clause, giving a daughter independent standing whenever her guardian profited from her account. Mara placed her mother's ration ledger on the table. Her uncle had charged winter meat, lamp oil, and guard wages from the girl's share. The magistrate who approved it used the common edition. The whole law would have required Mara's separate hearing. The witnesses entered the finding. The common text had omitted active standing. The omission had enabled personal profit. The second lesson belonged to Hearthside. The third concerned petitions by women without mates. The common edition required a male sponsor. Whole law allowed any subject facing loss of shelter, ration, labor payment, or bodily custody to petition under her own name. Evelda's students produced 7 rejected petitions. Every refusal cited lack of male sponsorship. The third lesson belonged to Hearthside. Althea remained composed. 3 omissions do not establish that every common addition is unlawful. No, Evelda said. The whole copy clause establishes that. The final lesson waited. Pack law must be copied whole wherever pack obedience is demanded. Stavor opened the public volume. The page ended 1 line before the requirement. No margin number followed. No supplement existed. The archive keeper opened Sabeth's witness edition. The clause remained beneath her royal mark. Althea made her strongest argument. Whole does not mean every ancestral provision in every village copy. It means the complete law appropriate to the reader's standing. A farmer does not receive succession law. A widow does not require palace procedure unless she enters palace jurisdiction. A woman losing her house is already inside the law, Evelda said. A daughter losing grain is already inside the law. You made standing depend on knowing a right, then remove the words that told them the right existed. Administrative division is not erasure. Then why were the missing lines never named? To prevent confusion, to prevent comparison. The recorder asked Stavor for the crown reading. He looked at the narrow volume in his hands, then at the complete text his mother had witnessed. The common edition cannot demand obedience to conditions. It refuses to disclose. Althea's face became still. You speak as a pupil, not as king. I speak as the first crown pupil required by the trust. If you rule against your own seal, every emergency act of your first year becomes vulnerable. Yes. The word moved through the street more powerfully than a growl. Stavor rose. The challenge finds that Hearthside taught active law. The common editions omitted material protections. Annex 12 enforcement is suspended across the kingdom, pending review. Household notifications tied to school attendance are void. Althea stepped toward the recorder. You cannot void censor notices without Moon Court ratification. Then summon Moon Court. It will not sit before dawn. Women will be punished before dawn, Evelda said. A rider broke through the guard line, his horse white with foam. Orders have already gone out. Ration offices and household magistrates received the closure confirmation at sunset. Althea did not look surprised. Automatic distribution, she said. Triggered when the king sealed the school. 37 notices were no longer waiting inside a packet. They were already moving through the kingdom under Stavor's name. Before dawn, Hearthside students became the fastest messengers in the kingdom. They knew which ration houses opened before sunrise, which magistrates slept above their offices, which widows would lose rooms if a notice reached the wrong brother-in-law first. Evelda divided the women into pairs and gave each a copy of Stavor's recorded suspension order. You do not argue at the door, she told them. You ask the official to read both orders aloud. If they refuse, write the refusal and bring it back. Stavor looked toward his guards. Royal riders will go with them. No, Evelda said. His jaw tightened. A king's escort will stop retaliation. It will also make every woman look like your informant. Send riders to the offices. Let the students go to one another. He accepted the distinction. By first light, royal messengers carried counter orders to every ration hall, inheritance court, household registry, and guardianship office named in Althea's packet. Stavor did not merely suspend the notices. He required each office to return its copy, record whether any action had begun, and restore whatever had already been taken. 3 widows had been ordered from their rooms. 2 daughters had lost ration standing. 1 laundress had been dismissed from the palace washhouse. Mara L's uncle had reached the grain office before the counter order. He had attempted to close her account and move the remaining share into his household ledger. The clerk had obeyed the first royal notice. He obeyed the second, too. That was the danger Evelda had spent years teaching women to see. A seal could reverse itself in an hour. The person beneath it carried the loss. At sunrise, Moon Court assembled outside Hearthside because Evelda refused to move the inquiry behind palace walls. Althea Gore stood before the judges in her censor robes. The notices were issued through an automatic enforcement process lawfully established under Annex 12, she said. No personal order was required after closure. You designed the process, one judge said. I administered powers authorized by the Crown. Powers prepared before the school taught the clauses named in its accusation, Evelda said. Althea looked at her. Because the school's danger was structural. It taught subjects to compare private injury across households and call the pattern law. That is what law is for. No. Law preserves the pack from endless private grievance. Then yours preserved the pack by deciding whose grief remained private. Althea did not confess. She defended the system to the end. She argued that full legal access would overwhelm local courts, weaken guardianship, delay inheritance, and turn every household disagreement into a crown dispute. Some magistrates agreed. Several counselors warned that restoring the omitted clauses would reopen thousands of transfers already completed. Evelda listened. Then she placed her own inheritance paper on the reading table. The winter fuel request remained attached to the hidden transfer that had taken her house. "This is not an old grievance," she said. "It is a method. You taught officials to hide the dangerous line, then blamed women for failing to find it." Stavor stood beside the lowest bench, not the throne. "My seal authorized that method." Every face turned toward him. Althea's expression changed for the first time. "You authorized emergency reform. I authorized words I did not read. The distinction matters. It matters to intent. It does not restore a single house." He submitted the first-year reform package, the Continuity Council minutes, and every grief protection filing to full Moon Court review. He also surrendered his private power to appoint the next Royal Censor without public confirmation. The judges withdrew only long enough to compare the trust, Sabeth's witness additions, Annex 12, and the 4 completed reading challenges. Their ruling was read before the sealed school. Annex 12 had never lawfully repealed the women's standing clauses. The common additions were incomplete. Any transfer, ration denial, guardianship action, or petition refusal relying upon the omissions could be challenged without fee. Attendance at Hearthside Moon School was lawful. Its register was a protected learning record, not Crown intelligence. The closure order was invalid from the moment it was issued. Stavor removed the moon iron seal himself. He did not ask Evelda to help. The metal resisted where the final spike had entered the oak. He worked it loose before the same women who had watched him drive it in. When the seal fell, the Moon-Slates remained still. They had not opened the school. Law had. Evelda crossed the threshold first. Inside, chalk dust lay over the benches. 37 names waited in the register beneath her locked desk. She took the book into both hands and gave it to 2 students chosen by the class. "From now on," she said, "the register belongs to the learners. No teacher, king, censor, husband, guardian, or court takes it without their consent." The women entered one by one. Outside, the ruling continued. Every common edition would be recalled and replaced with a whole law version written in plain language without removed rights. Every village would maintain free access to the full text. Women could petition in their own names. Officials who concealed material clauses inside relief, burial, ration, or debt papers would face removal. Althea was stripped of censor authority pending judgment for unlawful evidence, withholding, retaliatory monitoring, and pretextual closure. She was not condemned for believing order mattered. She was condemned for making ignorance the price of it. Stavor ordered the correction entered where the original accusation had been proclaimed. Then he faced Evelda. "I called your teaching a threat to pack order." She waited. "I sealed your school. I demanded the names of women I had not protected. I let my authority carry harm I never bothered to read." No excuse followed. "I cannot ask you to forgive that because I have finally named it." "No," Evelda said. "You cannot." Months passed. The recalled law books returned to Hearthside in wagons. Students from distant villages arrived carrying disputed contracts and questions their magistrates had once forbidden. Evelda trained readers, not followers. Stavor came without guards on the first winter evening after the new editions were distributed. He stood at the back of the classroom. "I was told the king once sat here," one widow said. "He did," Evelda answered. "Then he forgot the lesson." Stavor looked at the empty bench beside Mara. "I would learn it again, not privately. No, not as king. No. And no one slows the class because you are ashamed to ask a question." Something almost warm moved through his face. "I remember that rule." Evelda pointed to the bench. He sat among the women his law had harmed and opened the same common edition they were correcting line by line. When his shoulder touched Evelda's as she leaned over the page, neither pretended not to notice. But she did not soften the lesson, and he did not ask her to.